have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Thank you for joining us today. You can also join us online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. You definitely want to tune in on the news items that we've got on the websites there. David, a lot of things happening pretty quickly right now in the Middle East, and you've been very involved in this, one of your near and dear issues to your heart, and you guys have done so much for Israel and the troops over there. I know you're concerned with what's happening.
Yeah, it's what's going on in Israel. I'm really concerned about the American media, the way they cover it, because here you have Hamas doing everything they can to kill every civilian in Israel, and we got the president calling on Israel to restrain itself. And I'm sorry, Bubba, if everybody came after every citizen in the United States, there ain't no way you're going to restrain yourself. You're going to take out your enemy and those who try to kill you. And so it's even illogical. But the way it's presented in the American media, you would think that Hamas is the victim on this. And I know the guys in Israel. I know the military forces. I work with them there. We raise stuff for them. Before they even bomb something, they send text messages. They get out of that building. We're going to bomb it. They send leaflets. They fly leaflets over, drop the leaflets. They use broadcasts. They use everything. But Hamas loads those buildings up, and these are military dispensaries. They load them up with civilians so that when they do take out all the RPGs or they do take out all the bombs or whatever, a lot of civilians will be killed. And they can say, oh, we lost 14 kids and 24 women. And that's because Hamas puts them in there knowing that this is going down. So it's unethical the way the media deals with that. But having said that, I don't think most Americans understand the way militaries work elsewhere. Because here I've got two kids in the Army right now. Army takes care of their needs, their supplies, their provisions. When they go to war, the Army's got them covered, but not in Israel. And so just in the last couple of days, I've gotten emails from the Air Force and from the Navy SEALs and from the Army, and they're asking for help. Listen to this. You've got the Navy SEALs are opened up an emergency field base on the beach just north of Gaza. And they need 10 containers, like these shipping containers, but they use that for temporary dwellings. They need organized tents. The Navy doesn't have. These are Navy SEALs. They don't have this. They're asking for help with kitchen supplies, for field refrigeration, for field stove, cooking utensils. They're looking for Leatherman pliers to be able to put all their equipment together. Here's a list from the Army. The Army is asking if we can help them come up with 200 tactical knee pads so that when they're crawling around in those tunnels that Hamas built, they've got some protection on the knees. They're asking for 100 Leatherman tools. They're asking for 200 head flashlights so as they crawl through those tunnels, they can see where they're going. They're asking for help with canteens. Here's the 605 Regiment needs 200 sets of undershirts, socks, and underwear for their guys. See, we don't think like that. I mean, these guys, they go to war at their own expense. Every kid over there, when you turn 18, you serve in the military, and you got to take care of yourself. And that's just hard for a lot of these folks. So the Golani Brigade, the 82nd Regiment, the Counterterrorism Unit, the 603rd Regiment, the 82nd Regiment. We got all these notes from all these folks saying, help, can you help, can you help, can you help? And you've also got the Air Force over there. And we've really worked hard to try to start building some barracks on Air Force bases there, because when they hear that a missile is coming in, they have 4 minutes to get those pilots in the air in the F-16s and get them up, and then they got 3 minutes to knock down whatever's coming in. So you got to be out quick, but they don't even have the housing to house the pilots on the bases where these F-16s are. So, I mean, you just got to understand how different it is for the Israeli military, and how different it is for the American military. And so on the website at wallbuilders.com, if you want to help with any of this, you're welcome to. There's a button there you can help with. But folks who have been in war understand this a whole lot better than those who have not been in war. And I haven't been in war. I've been around it, and I deal with those who are in it. Again, I've got kids who have made several tours. So, I'm close to it from that standpoint. But if you want to help those who are actually in it, you can do that. And we got somebody on today who has been actually in it, who knows what's going on and agree that most civilians don't. We thought it'd be really good to get his perspective on what's happening over there.
Again, the website, wallbuilders.com. You can just click on that link right at the top, and you can help with what we're doing for the Israeli military. It's a great way for you to support those that are literally fighting for their lives and for freedom.
And by the way, Rick, let me throw in Genesis 12:3. When you help Israel, you give God a reason to bless you, period. Bottom line, God made a covenant, said, this is my nation. Abraham, I'll make from you a nation. Whoever blesses them, I'll bless. Whoever curses them, I'll curse. You want to do something that God can bless, here's a good opportunity.
Amen. Good stuff. Our guest today is David French. He'll be with us when we return right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. The teachings of God's Word are the best friend civil government has because these teachings deal with the heart. Only by dealing with the heart can crime be prevented, for as Jesus explained in Matthew 5, all crime comes from the heart. Understanding this, Daniel Webster, the great defender of the Constitution, once declared, "The cultivation of the religious sentiment represses licentiousness. It inspires respect for law and order and gives strength to the whole social fabric. Whatever makes men good Christians makes them good citizens. Indeed, it is not the good Christians whom the police arrest for armed robbery, gang activity, or other such crimes. Understanding this, the Founding Fathers encouraged religious instruction, for as Daniel Webster so accurately noted, good Christians make good citizens."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our good friend David French is with us, Senior Counsel from American Center for Law and Justice. Captain French, good to have you on, brother.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
Hey, I absolutely love your response to all the talk about how, Israel needs to have a, quote, reasonable response. Well, what do you say the, quote, reasonable response should be?
Well, I completely agree Israel's response should be reasonable. I mean, who's against unreasonableness? But the reasonable response is to completely obliterate Hamas.
There you go.
That's the reasonable response here. I mean, look, Hamas, their goal is to destroy Israel. They're building tunnels with the exit points near Israeli homes, schools, villages, so that they can sneak terrorists into Israel to kill civilians. They launch thousands, not hundreds, thousands of rockets into Israel indiscriminately, hoping to kill as many Israelis as they can. If any foreign entity did that to us, we would destroy that entity.
That's
we would
right.
do our best to destroy that entity, and that would be our right under international law, and it would be our moral obligation to the citizens that a national government is sworn to protect. So I don't get the concept that anything that Israel has done is unreasonable. In fact, they've been, in my mind, excessively cautious in dealing with Hamas.
So why does it seem like they are held to a totally different standard? I mean, it's like we expect them to just take death and destruction from this neighbor and this terrorist organization, Hamas, and not respond like everybody else. How do people justify an expectation that is different for them than for everyone else?
Well, I'll give you a one-word answer that applies outside the U.S. largely, and unfortunately some inside the U.S., and that's anti-Semitism. I mean, look, if you go and you look at Europe, number one, does anyone doubt that Europe has an incredibly long, sordid, and sad history of anti-Semitism? And the largest immigrant groups right now in Europe, the ones that are rioting in Paris and London, are Muslim citizens from the Middle East and North Africa who have imported with them their vicious anti-Semitism that's overtaken much of the Muslim world. So there's no logical or rational explanation for it. It's pure anti-Semitism. I think here in the United States, I'm not going to go so far as to say that the President of the United States is anti-Semitic. I don't know where his heart is on that, but I will say I believe the President of the United States appeases radical Islam. And I think that the pressure that he puts on Israel to not defend itself is part of that effort to appease radical Islam. It's something that he has done since the beginning of his presidency. He's been an appeasing president, and right now we're reaping all of the consequences of that.
Well, how do we do, even more so than appeasement? How do we deal with the fact that this administration is supporting a terrorist organization like Hamas through the Palestinian government? I mean, you point that out in your article.
Absolutely. We have a unity government, a quote-unquote unity government that combines Fatah and Hamas. And the President of the United States, and through the Secretary of State and the Department of State, has said we're going to continue to fund that entity even though it's joined with Hamas. Now, keep in mind, it's a crime. It is a crime under U.S. law to provide material support to a designated terrorist organization. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. And doubling down on that, Secretary Kerry said that the U.S. was going to be providing $47 million in, quote, humanitarian aid to Gaza. Well, we know what Hamas does with humanitarian aid. They divert concrete, they divert building materials to build terror tunnels, and when they do build schools, when they do build hospitals, they store rockets and bombs in those schools and hospitals. So any money spent on infrastructure or aid in Gaza right now directly supports Hamas, and everybody knows that. It's not a subject of controversy or debate. That's what Hamas does, and yet this administration continues to pour money into the unity government and is now going to put $47 million more directly into Gaza. It's inexcusable. There should be not 1 cent, not one drop of aid that goes to Gaza until Hamas is gone.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, just a rational response, and as you said, reasonable response to a situation like this is as long as your country, your government, from your little area, as long as rockets are being launched at another nation, we're not going to send you aid. I mean, why should we be sending money into an area that is right now the source of terror?
There's no reason. There's no reason. But the Obama administration, going back to the Cairo speech in 2009, he's signaled where he's going. He signaled in 2009 where he was going, and he's done everything consistent with that approach since. And his approach was essentially this, that all of our problems in the Middle East were due to big, bad American administrations who weren't sufficiently understanding of the grievances of the Muslim world, that terrible American administrations had violated American values through, for example, Gitmo and through various quote-unquote aggressive wars, and that with this new tone coming out of Washington, this new tone coming from the president, that we would begin to see the tide of jihad recede. But it fundamentally misunderstands what jihad is all about. Jihad is not a reaction to any given American policy or any given American president. It is a fundamental theological drive that is widespread within the Muslim world that seeks the creation of a caliphate. And one of the prerequisites of that would be the destruction of Israel, which many, many millions of Muslims see as an interloper into Muslim land. And so Hamas has that worldview. It has that apocalyptic worldview. Its jihad is not motivated by George W. Bush or by Bill Clinton or by Barack Obama. Its jihad is motivated by its own faith. And so that faith cannot be appeased. Their actions, and they can only be defeated. And that's why Israel has to stay there until the job is done.
Very quick break. David French is our guest. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. America has a history of great patriots who loved and sacrificed much for their country. One of these was John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While president at Princeton, he personally trained many who became important leaders in American government, including James Madison. How could John Witherspoon tell if someone really loved America? He explained, "He is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting true and undefiled religion, and who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Whoever is an avowed enemy of God, I hesitate not to call him an enemy to his country." Founding Father John Witherspoon believed that a true American patriot opposed profanity and immorality and promoted true and undefiled religion.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. David French is with us. He's Senior Counsel at American Center for Law and Justice. And, David, what you were just describing before we went to break, that explanation of what's actually happening out there is so important. And I'm thinking of a specific group in America right now, and it's these young people, kind of, 15 to even 25 or 30 years old. This is maybe the first time they've paid attention to the conflict there against Israel, and so they're beginning to form their opinions. And I got to say, the Islamic community has gotten really good at marketing and selling the reasons why they do what they do over there. Perhaps better than those of us that know the history of this. So what you just described, as you were saying it, I was thinking about all this, and I was thinking this is so important to give these descriptions, because these young people are buying the lies, hook, line, and sinker, and they need to be told the truth and the history here of the Palestinian people, of that whole conflict there, because, if you look at polling data, it's amazing to me how many of the young people are siding with the terrorists. They don't realize they're terrorists, but they've bought this thing you were talking about earlier, this almost excuse for and I would say the apologies that we make for terrorist activity from these groups. So, I mean, I'm rambling here, but I want you to help put this in context for those young people that have never really thought about this issue until they're seeing what's happening right now, and all of a sudden their attention's been brought to it, but they're only getting one side in the major media.
Well, look, Hamas is very good at marketing death. And every single time you see a civilian die in Gaza and you get angry at Israel, Hamas wins. Every single time. Their entire strategy depends on attacking Israel from civilian areas, hiding behind civilians. When Israel defends itself, taking the civilians that die as a result of Israel's self-defense and putting them all over the international media for the very purpose of making people angry. That's their strategy.
And it works, man. It works. A week ago, we landed in Phoenix, or I don't even remember where we were. We get off the plane, and of course, they had CNN on the monitors, and it was exactly what you're describing, a sob story making you feel sorry for the ones that had started the whole thing. But that's not what you were hearing. All you were hearing was the horrible Israeli attack. So what you're saying, it works.
Yeah, absolutely it works, and it works in part because of our media plays into the Hamas story. Look, the fact that more Palestinians have been killed in this conflict than Israelis is a testimony to the effectiveness of Israel's defense. Benjamin Netanyahu said it very well. The goal of the IDF is to prevent civilian deaths. The goal of Hamas is to cause civilian deaths. Now, whether those deaths are Palestinians or Israelis does not matter so much to Hamas as long as civilians die. That's their goal. So then they put out these numbers, like 800 Palestinians killed and 30 Israelis killed, and they say, look, it's not a fair fight. Well, you know what? In war, it's not supposed to be a fair fight. When I was in Iraq, and when we were fighting jihadists in Iraq, we were not sitting there saying, well, we got to make this fair. We got to do a better job of getting killed so that the casualty ratio is the same.
Right.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
When you're fighting a war, you're trying to make sure your enemy dies, not that you die. And it's a source of great grief to me and to many of my brothers in arms that we weren't better at making sure that only the enemy died. So you look at these casualty rates, and number one, you have to realize every single Palestinian casualty is the fault of Hamas. If Hamas did not launch rockets, if Hamas did not hide behind human shields, not one Palestinian would die, not one. And everyone has to understand that. It is an unmistakable, inarguable, incontrovertible fact of this conflict. And anyone who has a modicum of knowledge about this and yet still supports or critiques Israel is objectively pro-Hamas. That's what the reality is. They are pro-Hamas.
Now repeat what you said.
Otherwise.
Repeat what you said, because that's what needs to sink in. Not one Palestinian would die if the Hamas would stop bombing Israel and stop, in our language here, picking the fight.
Exactly. In 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza. There's not an Israeli presence in Gaza. When they pulled out in 2005, they even gave greenhouses to the Palestinians that had been built by Israelis as a method of jump-starting an agricultural component to their economy. You know what the Palestinian activists did? They tore down those greenhouses immediately. There's not been an Israeli, quote-unquote, occupation in Gaza since 2005. So what Hamas did, rather than try to build a functioning society, is they went around and got busy building homemade rockets and tunnels to tunnel into Israel to kill Israelis. That's what they did. And if they would not do that, if they would stop doing that, no Palestinians would die. Israel has no desire to occupy Gaza. They pulled out of Gaza. They have every desire to see a functioning civil society in Gaza, yet Hamas refuses to let that happen, sprays rockets into Israel, builds terror tunnels into Israel, and then weeps crocodile tears for the world media when Israel has the audacity to defend itself. That's the moral dynamic here. And I'm sorry to tell you, if somebody looks at that morality and sides with Hamas, that is a sign of their own fundamental moral failings. And people who are siding on Hamas with this, that tells me they have lost any sense of moral perspective.
Very true, David. As I let you go, just quick, I guess, analysis from your part. How is Benjamin Netanyahu doing with all this?
Well, he's doing very, very well, because he learned early on in this conflict that his primary ally is not the Obama administration, which is in full-on appeasement mode. Its entire Middle East strategy is collapsing. His main ally actually is Egypt. And why is Egypt an ally? Because Egypt has a very recent and terrible experience with the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood-created entity. So long as Egypt and Israel remain unified in their approach, that Hamas has to be reduced to, that Hamas's presence in Gaza has to be defeated, then Israel is in a very, very strong position. And that's where they are right now, and that's why Israel is empowered to reject these American ceasefire offers, because they have a strong ally in Egypt, which has just been burned by the Muslim Brotherhood. And so I think that Benjamin Netanyahu has maneuvered Israel into a very strong strategic position.
Good to hear. Good to hear. David French, God bless you, brother. Keep up the great work over there at ACLJ, and we'll look forward to having you on again soon.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Back in a moment with David Barton. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall, in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty, and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Special thanks to David French. Always does a great interview, David. I tell you, he's one of the more articulate guys in the arena right now, and I appreciated him being so blunt about it because often we two-step around this issue a little bit too much.
Reasonable response: obliterate Hamas.
Yeah.
That's not tiptoeing, but that's exactly what you do in war. If you're going to have an enemy, and I will tell you, Rick, I have been watching videos coming out of that part of the world with others in the same thing, and what is not being shown is, for example, the Israelis they've taken, tortured them. After they kill them, slash their throat, they tie them behind motorcycles and drag them through the streets. Now, if Israel did that to anyone, media would be all over that. That's what they're doing with all these Israelis that they're capturing. They're slashing the throat of all these teenagers they get, of all these other people. And they're bringing these tunnels up, and I think people hopefully have heard that Hamas is digging these tunnels, and they were putting bombs under Israeli kindergartens to blow them up. Media's not talking about that. Some of the conservative media is. And then we just gave Hamas another $47 million so they can build more tunnels. You know, they don't put that money into humanitarian relief. And by the way, I got word from the Israeli military that first ceasefire that Israel gave so that Hamas could do humanitarian relief, they went and booby-trapped more tunnels, and they lost Israeli soldiers as a result of that ceasefire to let them get the wounded people. They didn't get the wounded people out. They just built more booby traps, so when the Israelis came back after 2 hours, they took out Israelis. So that's the kind of enemy you have to exterminate, because they do not think reasonable. They do not think like humans. They do not think humane. They think about killing and murder straight out. And they do not wear uniforms. Every one of those guys that is a military guy wears a civilian thing, so that when they get killed, you can say you're killing civilians. I mean, by the Articles of War, you have to have a difference between military uniforms and civilian uniforms. These guys fight a war, but they don't. And so, you know, David's right. I appreciate his candidness on this, and he brings a really good perspective. Again, for folks who want to help Israel, go to our website, wallbuilders.com. You'll see a button there. If you want to do something, feel free to do so. We'll make sure it gets to the troops in Israel.
WallBuilders.com. Check it out today. Thank you for listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.